My watch is past 5:30. We need to move on. Thank you. That's my call to work. I got to rise and do that.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to move on to approval of minutes. The board members will take a moment, express themselves if they need to, and give the motion.
I move.
Second. Excuse me. Move. Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Approved. All right. Consideration of public comments. Have any out there who need? Hearing none. Reports. Open meeting law presentation.
All right, good evening.
Don't have to either speak up or use that.
All right, good evening. My name is Sydney Mealy. I'm the city clerk here in Kingman. Several of you have been through my presentation before, but I'm also seeing some new faces, so hopefully this will be a great one for you. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me, ask for clarification. Please don't be intimidated by anything in this presentation. I hear that a lot because it's rules that you guys have to follow. We give you guys this presentation to help you guys stay within the boundaries that are set by the state. This is something that has to be followed by the legislature on down. We all have to do it, so we just want to make sure you guys know where the rules are so that we can help you stay within them. So please feel free to ask any questions along the way. So it is the public policy of the state that meetings of any public body be conducted openly and that notices and agendas be provided for those meetings and contain information as is reasonably necessary to inform the public on matters to be discussed, considered, or decided. To that end, any person charged with interpretation of this law shall construe any provision of it in favor of open and public meetings. And all meetings of any public body must be public meetings, and all persons desiring to attend shall be permitted to attend and listen to the deliberations and proceedings. A lot of words just to say that the public business must be conducted in public. So why does this matter? Protects the public and preserves their right to participate in their government, and it protects you as a public body and hopefully ensures a better informed citizenry as a result. Public body is defined as the legislature, all boards and commissions of the state or any political subdivision, and all standing, special, or advisory committees or subcommittees of or appointed by a public body. So as the city of Kingman is a political subdivision of the state of Arizona, you are a commission thereof and must follow this. This does include our quasi-judicial bodies like the Board of Adjustments and Building Board of Appeals. And this also includes any subcommittees that may be formed by the council or any of our commissions. With that, you can form subcommittees to discuss a particular matter as a quarterly commission, or now I believe you guys are bi-monthly. I understand that can sometimes feel like it's making things take a little bit longer for you guys to do the work you want to do. You guys are able to create subcommittees to discuss a particular topic. They have to be 3 or fewer members, and you still have to post agendas, take minutes, and the city will not provide the staff to do that. We simply just don't have the manpower to do that for all of the commissions and everything on top of that. Yeah?
It seems that what you just said is like if two of us wanted to, right, then we have to have an agenda. But sometimes we have want to help with a project or what have you, maybe one of us would be involved with members, talk about something, whatever, and I'd come back and report here. That qualifies as a subcommittee, or is it only, that was like a, I don't know if you remember, it was a thing.
I know, that question comes up probably about once a year for me. That does not qualify as a subcommittee. I always recommend that our commissions don't formally recognize any particular group or vote to create a particular group, because then you're making them a subcommittee of yourselves. But absolutely, if there's a group that wants one of you to be a part of them, you guys can assign a liaison. That does not require anything for open meeting law, and you guys are good.
Okay, so the third leg would be liaison.
Yes. But it should be just one of you. Please don't have 3 liaisons attending one meeting. Yeah. And another thing to consider with a lot of this is the public perception. Even though, 3 of you happen to show up to a chamber mixer, that's obviously not a violation. But if 3 or 4 of you are hanging out together and somebody overhears, oh yeah, we served together on HPC, the public perception is, oh, well, and they're talking about business, and we do have some very informed members of our public, and so just be aware of those perceptions. So a quorum is defined as the majority of the members of a board or commission, and vacant positions do not reduce this requirement. So as a 7-member body, your quorum is going to be 4. We do have a couple of 5-member bodies, so their quorum is 3, but again, vacancies do not reduce this. So if you guys, through vacancies, get down to a 5-member board and are just having a hard time getting those people to show up, you do still have to have 4 in order to meet. So, I skipped a slide. Yeah, a meeting is defined as the gathering in person or through technological devices of a quorum of the members of a public body at which they discuss, propose, or take any action, including deliberations, by that quorum. So technological devices are defined as, but not limited to, emails, websites, blogs, tweets, Facebook, telephone and video conferences, text messages, or any other similar technologies. This was recently tightened up by the state, and they're really looking at social media, emails. So please just be aware, don't ever reply all to any emails that come out to the commission, even though that's not your intent and you're just trying to share information. You're inadvertently creating a meeting just by hitting reply all and sending an opinion or a piece of information to the group. Same thing with Facebook. This has been toned down a lot for us, thankfully, in recent years. But for a long time, we were having issues where several members of the commission would get on, for example, the Daily Miners Facebook page and comment on articles. And next thing they know, it's kind of evolving into this whole serial discussion that really should be happening here in an actual meeting, not just for people that have Facebook. So please just be aware of that. And again, please do not reply all. That seems to be where most of our commissioners get in trouble. We understand that there's no intent, but please just be cognizant of it. You can also create a meeting by splintering the quorum, and this occurs when less than a quorum of the members of a public body discuss any matter a matter of city business, and then those members later discuss that item with other members of the public body. So, Commissioner Huntoon, if you and Mr. Dutton were discussing something and said, hey, you know what, that's a great idea, why don't we look at taking that to the commission, and then each of you went and talked to another member of the commission, even though 4 of you weren't there together, you've just created a serial discussion through a quorum, and that is a violation. No meeting can take place with less than 24 hours notice to the public and each member of the body. And agendas have to contain date, time, and location of the meeting. That's why we meet here at a specific date and time. And must contain information on specific matters to be discussed and any information as is reasonably necessary to inform the public. You can discuss other matters that come up, but they must be directly related to an item on the agenda. So if you guys are talking about historical preservation downtown and somebody says, well, what about that building way up on Hilltop? It's not related. Best best thing you're going to need to do is refer that to another agenda. Yeah.
Agenda cannot be changed by the
During the meeting?
agenda after.
Correct. Again, only items specifically listed on the agenda may be discussed, considered, or decided. If it is not on the agenda, it is best not to discuss it. If a matter not specifically listed on the agenda does come up, best practice and the one to avoid subsequent headaches for all of you and the staff liaisons that you all have is to defer that discussion for another meeting. So ask that staff place that on a future agenda. And any action taken on an item not properly noticed on an agenda is null and void. Call to the public is an agenda item that allows the public to address you on matters within your purview. These are not required by state statute, and you may impose a reasonable time limit on speakers. Ms. Sandy has the timer that functions right here for them. With this, because they're not required by state statute, if they are not listed on your agenda, there is no call to the public. The public can still offer input on other items on your agenda if you as the public body decide to, but unless it is a public hearing, that's not a requirement for you. So please just bear that in mind, especially if you're having a topic that's going to really run long. Just bear that in mind. Or if you call a special meeting for something and there's not a call to the public on that agenda, there shouldn't be a call to the public at all at that meeting. As a commission, you have 4 options during the call to the public. You can respond to a criticism after the close of the call to the public. You can ask that staff review an item. You can ask that the matter be placed on a future agenda so that you can discuss it, or you can sit in silence. You certainly do not have to respond. The public does have a right to attend, listen, tape record, or videotape your meetings. They do not have the right to speak or disrupt. I don't think we get too many hot topics here with the Historic Preservation Commission, but it does happen from time to time. We do talk about the sanctions that can be involved with violations of the open meeting law. Again, we don't say this to scare you. We say this because it is in state statute, and we want to let you guys know that there are very real penalties involved with this. The civil penalties can include up to $500 for each violation, and the court can also assess attorney's fees and court injunctions. And you, as a public official, may also be removed from the commission. With this, I do like to use splintering the quorum as an example. That's $500 per person involved in that serial discussion and $500 per occurrence that happened. So just please bear that in mind, that there are just some serious consequences if you choose to go that route. Again, any action taken in violation of open meeting law is null and void. And these sanctions can be enforced not only against you, but against any person who knowingly aids, agrees to aid, or attempts to aid anyone in violating the open meeting law. So if you have a mutual friend and you're like, oh, I've already talked to 2 people about this. Hey, can you pass a message to them? That doesn't excuse you from open meeting law violations. It just brings them into it with you. Again, we don't have too many issues with conflict of interest on our commissions currently, but we do like to discuss it with you just so that you're aware. It is illegal to fail to declare a conflict of interest under Arizona state law and to participate or otherwise be involved in any discussion on issues or contracts where any conflict exists. This covers not only public officials and employees, but also applies to their relatives as well. And in general, this is going to occur when someone is involved with a salaried employment or substantial ownership of a private corporation doing business with the city. And a public officer or employee may sell equipment, materials, supplies, etc. to the city only after public competitive bidding. Remote interests are ones that are so minor they don't constitute an illegal conflict of interest. The question I get most often with this one is, well, I have a friend who's applying for the commission. Can I vote to recommend them? Yes, you can. Just knowing someone is not enough to excuse them. This isn't a paid position. You're not going to get any personal benefit out of it. Neither are they. It's looking specifically for those monetary conflicts. if you have any questions at any time about open meeting law or conflict of interest, you can contact my office or the city attorney's office. So any questions on that? All right. Move on to parliamentary procedure. I'll try to make this as quick and painless as I can for you because I know you have a busy night. Parliamentary procedure is a set of basic rules on how to conduct your meetings. They allow everyone to be heard and decisions to be made without confusion. These are a time-tested method for conducting business at meetings, and they can be adapted to fit the need of any organization. This presentation is going to be based on Robert's Rules of Order, but the City of Kingman has not formally adopted Robert's Rules. We just use it as more of a guideline to follow. This is going to be the general order for all of our meetings from the council down through our commissions. You may or may not see all of those on your agendas throughout your time with us, but just be aware if you do see like awards and recognition come up, that's probably going to be a new one for HPC if you guys wanted to participate in a contest or something, but just be aware when you do see those. Motion is simply how a proposal is put to the entire membership for their consideration and how members express themselves. Mainly you're going to use main motions, and it's simply I move that we, like with your minutes, I move that we approve the minutes of whatever the date is. The life of a motion is simple. There's a motion, there's a second, there's any debate on the motion, and a vote. Motions are presented by obtaining the floor, get the attention of your chairperson, and wait to be recognized. Make your motion as clearly and concisely as possible. Please state your motion affirmatively, such as I move that we, rather than I move that we do not. Making it as clear and concise as you can. This is something even new council members have a hard time with sometimes. It'll be I move that we, rather than saying I move that we deny, it's I move that we don't move forward with doing this proposal. And it confuses everybody. Make it clear and concise, motion to deny or motion to approve. After you state your motion, wait for someone to second it. If there is no second, the motion is lost. Once there is a second, the chairperson should restate the motion that's before the group. And you can expand on your motion at any time throughout the discussion. If you find that your motion is kind of getting lost in the discussion and it's really morphing into something else, the best thing that we recommend that you do is rescind your motion, wait until the discussion is done, and then clearly state exactly what you want to do. That's best for all of you, it's best for the public, and it's best for your recording secretaries as well. I've had a lot of recording secretaries come to me over the years, and I don't know what they were trying to get at. And if your recording secretary is getting to that point with you, please just withdraw your motion and clearly state it. You can vote on a motion most commonly by voice. Every once in a while we do have matters where the public wants you to do a roll call vote. They want to know exactly how each of you voted, or if it's a really tight split vote that your recording secretary can't hear exactly who's voting which way, they may request to do a roll call vote so that they can clearly see which each one of you votes. Some other motions that you might commonly use are a motion to table. If you're not ready to vote on an item, you feel it needs a little more work, send it back to staff. Use that motion to table until the next meeting, until staff is ready to bring it back, until whatever the case may be. And you can also use a motion to postpone indefinitely. If you guys have talked the subject to death, you're not ready to push it forward to the council, you really don't feel like it should go anywhere, just use a motion to postpone indefinitely, and that kills the item. So just to wrap up, please only allow motions that are in order. Make sure that it's on the topic that you've been discussing. Have members obtain the floor properly. Speak clearly and concisely and state your motions that way as well. And please obey the rules of the debate. Most importantly, be courteous. So with that, are there any questions on parliamentary procedures? All right. And with that, have a good evening.
Moving on on to old business. Very nice.
I just went through and also and created these maps. Assessments. And mapped out all the time. That's fine. But these are the, they have the SH reservation and NRH. So some of them will only, but many of them.
If they don't have a national number, it'll say NL for not listed. And then it has the APN, which is the assessor's parcel number, the property owner, or the property name as listed on the National Registry, and then the site address, and the status as of 2015. And then it's just broken up by the different SHPO section numbers, which are 1 through 11? 11. And I think, did you get the overview map in there as well? No. Okay. I don't see it in there. I did have, yeah, I have, yeah, it is in there. An overview map which kind of maps it all out together on one. Looking for it. Oh, it's this one. So it shows the different sections where they fall that are listed on individual pages. And I believe it's complete. Are there any questions about it?
So this is a summary of that book, basically, plus the National Registry. Have you had any response yet about the SHPO number assignments for properties that are not part of that book? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's what kind of triggered me to do this, was you were wondering where those numbers come from. And they are based, like the 1 dash, are based on these different sections.
Well, I know where they come from, but are they assigned by SHPO, and do we have to get approval for that, or can we add to it?
I believe, and I didn't get an answer.
Okay, you didn't. Okay, that's okay.
But my belief is that when we submit a form, they then provide us, or when we're about to submit a form, they would provide us with a number that would be appropriate. That's my belief. I would.
That's what I thought too. I was just wondering if you had a chance to get further on that than I did. I never got that question answered. This is fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you. I found it very interesting to go through. Had not seen a comprehensive list like this for some time, so very interesting to review. Thank you. Survey.
Lowest level is
The state is the lowest level. We or anybody that has a home that would qualify, any individual can submit to the state. The forms are available at the state parks website. And which is where the State Historic Preservation Office information is stored as well. So you can go to the parks website and get a form and fill it out and complete it and submit it directly to the state, or they could, I believe, submit it through us. I'm not sure. And then we would turn around and send it on to the state. But there is, to answer your question, there isn't a city repository of historic properties.
City.
There is not.
Forms are available.
Hmm.
Thank you, and my apologies for not realizing. Still trying to figure out. So, excuse me.
That's okay.
The new business, Dorian Scott Holiday.
That's it.
President, please come forward.
Oh, good evening. Let's see, I had a presentation. I don't know if you have that loaded on here. Is that? Or I have it here as well if I can. It's usually. Right. There we go. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay. Oh,
Slideshow, operator,
so
or the right.
more to the right. Okay, there we go. Okay, a little different than that. Okay, thanks. Well, I'm Scott Soliday. I am a historian and architectural historian. I've been in this line of work for about 20 years now. And during that time, I've kind of worked all over the state. I've gotten pretty familiar with a lot of the different historic resources all around the state. And I know one of the things that, a lot of communities have really made a lot with their historic properties, their downtown buildings, some of their notable neighborhoods. And a great deal of this is due to the National Register of Historic Places that really has made it possible to identify all of these different properties that are important for how they represent our history and our architecture, and also for how to deal with them. And unfortunately, one of the things that the National Register doesn't really do, or any of the federal laws generally, is it can't prevent historic buildings from being torn down or drastically changed or anything else, but it does provide some incentives, and a lot of different communities have taken advantage of this. And you can see that there's all kinds of different unusual buildings that sometimes are just kind of squeezed in amongst all kinds of modern buildings that you would not expect. And, just as an example of some of the places that have really made very good use of this, obviously Jerome is probably one of the best known historic sites in the state. And they've really they've done quite well with that. And there's, if you look here on the left, that's what it looked like not too long ago. Obviously, they've cleaned it up quite a bit. And then on the right, some of the interesting little areas that you can find within a community. Bisbee also has more recently gotten a lot of attention for its historic architecture, its sort of quirky downtown. Also something that makes it a very popular destination for a lot of people to come to. And one that a lot of people aren't quite as familiar with, Cottonwood has made a lot of progress in just the last 10 years, maybe a little bit more than 10 years. Their old historic downtown was at one time almost entirely vacant. Most of it was boarded up. And the city really put an effort into restoring that area, bringing it back to life, and now it's very popular. It has a lot of activity going on there. that brings me to, well, of course, I want to talk about Kingman a little bit. And I found this Kingman Multiple Resource Area nomination, which I believe is probably the basis for just about everything that you do, your inventory of historic buildings, why they're important, what they are. I don't know if you've updated very much here, and because this was done in 1986, and obviously that's quite a while ago. And because to be eligible for the National Register, one of the most important things to start with is that a building has to be 50 years old or more. And so what you have previously listed and nominated to the National Register kind of ends in 1939. And from 1940 to 1970, there's a whole 30-year period in there that can be very important as well. Now, I think that 50-year period is almost a magic number because, you know, as buildings get to be 30 years old, 40 years old, people see them as, well, they're kind of old, they're outdated. Once a building makes it past 50 years old, if it's in good condition, if it still can show what it looked like originally, it becomes a little bit more interesting, and people start to see that it's not just an old building, it's now a historic building. And this is something that is, I think, especially in Phoenix, they've probably taken advantage of this more than anyone else, of promoting their mid-century historic buildings, both residential areas and business, commercial buildings that are very representative of this period of time, which is now becoming, there's a lot more interest overall in the general public. And you know, I think that, well, I'd like to use it as an example of sort of what's possible with looking at other historic properties that you may not necessarily know of, or even, you know, people aren't necessarily always thinking of them in terms of being historic. But Tempe I'm very familiar with. I used to work for the city for quite a while. I was on the Tempe Historic Preservation Commission, and actually quite a bit of the work I've done in the last 20 years has been in Tempe. And, you know, they have certainly a lot of important landmarks, the Hayden Flour Mill, which right now there is a lot of plans for redeveloping that, finding, well, first restoring the building, stabilizing it, and then also adaptive reuse of the building, some of it that will be used for offices, some of it that will be restaurants and shops. And believe it or not, the silos will become a hotel with windows cut into the side there. It's apparently they have a way to make that happen, but it's certainly a very interesting community. And another thing about Tempe is that we had one of these multiple resource area nominations done about the same time in 1983. And unfortunately for Tempe, we lost about 70% of those buildings that were listed as historic properties, mostly due to downtown redevelopment. There were a lot of historic neighborhoods just west of Mill Avenue, and pretty much all of those were demolished for redevelopment in downtown Tempe. And so at this point, we're a little bit more sensitive about those that we have remaining. And Tempe has taken quite a bit of interest in their post-World War II properties, because this is, well, it's the next step. These are now historic. And, you know, there's a couple of projects that I worked on here. Borden Homes, built between 1947 and 1950. And you can see it's basically ranch-style house, fairly small houses. And yet this has become a very special neighborhood. And Joe Nucci is who was the longtime historic preservation officer for Tempe. Often, anytime he was talking with his colleagues in city planning, if he was talking to the city council, so many times he would have this one saying that historic preservation is neighborhood preservation, and that's some issue that has become very important for the city of Tempe. Of course, having a huge university right in the middle of your community can put a lot of stress on trying to plan things and preserve things. And this was an issue that Tempe had been having for quite some time. And especially this neighborhood, which is only about a half a mile from ASU, was what we found looking back about 20 years ago, is that this whole neighborhood was mostly rentals. It was not being maintained. There was a lot of crime, and there were some of the residents of this neighborhood who decided to do something about that. And one of the things they really promoted was to get recognition as a historic district, and it took them a long time. But that only happened, I believe it was 10 years ago, and even at that point there was a lot of change that was happening, but. The changes are that we now have a much higher percentage of owner-occupied houses, fewer rentals. We have higher property values. A lot of that is because the owners are investing in it, and they're doing a lot more maintenance and repair. And this is something that has happened in other neighborhoods in Tempe. And so I think Joe Nucci's words that historic preservation can be neighborhood preservation is that those are some very important things, because there are a lot of these neighborhoods in Tempe that needed this, and if nothing was done, there are a lot of these that would have really probably declined over time, which has happened in so many neighborhoods. But one of the things you notice is 1947 to 1950, this is the period immediately after the end of World War II. And the next one we have just kind of picks up where that one left off in Tomlinson Estates, just right next door to Borden Homes. And one of the things about Tomlinson Estates is that it's a little bit different. This is the Borden Homes, but especially Tomlinson Estates. They're important not just for their architecture. That's one of the primary things when you have a post-World War II neighborhood, but also for the influence that the Federal Housing Administration had on this neighborhood. And at this time, in order to have a whole neighborhood pre-qualified for FHA loans, you had to follow certain guidelines. And for the most part, you had to build almost identical houses. This was considered important in order to keep property values high. And since the federal government had an interest in this, loaning all this money, they didn't want property values to decline, and then for the federal government to have to be liable for a huge debt that might occur. But basically, we have the three different models right here that you will find in Tomlinson Estate, and they change them around a little bit. There's a few minor details, but this is one of the things that's very typical of these early ranch-style neighborhoods. They wanted to make sure that they were eligible, that at least everybody was eligible for FHA loans. And that was certainly a good selling point for something like this. And then moving up, we also have Date Palm Manor. This kind of spans a little different period. Well, this is actually going up in time. This is very different kind of neighborhood. This was the ritzy neighborhood of Tempe in the 1950s. All of the movers and shakers of the city, the people that could afford nice big custom homes. Obviously, these are not back homes, and this is something that a lot of people in Tempe were glad to see. Even though this is a very small neighborhood, it's not a lot of people that live there. We got some negative feedback from SHPO, well, actually one person at the State Historic Preservation Office. They're not nice enough to be, custom houses. Well, this is Tempe, it's not Phoenix, and I think that this was actually nominated pretty early, and over time, I think that the State Historic Preservation Office has come to realize that there are differences between communities, but this whole idea of, the 50s is still fairly new. This is something that everyone's learning how to deal with right now. And what's up? I guess that's it there. But I just wanted to illustrate a few things there and to point out that, I wanted to come up here. I've been, contacting a lot of different towns and cities around Arizona. I wanted to just introduce myself, and hopefully at some point, if you ever need any kind of work in later historic property survey or National Register nominations, I'm apparently one of the few people in the state that do this. There's not too many. But also that, we're looking at this entirely different period of time, very different approach to construction, to architecture, a lot more concrete and glass, not so much brick anymore, and also different types of resources that you may not always think of. Shopping centers, one of the things that really illustrate the changes between before World War II and after World War II, because now we've become an automobile-oriented society, and you need a place to park your car. And so by the 1950s, shopping centers are becoming much more common, and this becomes a very important new type of historic resource that you can consider. Let me think what else we have here. Shopping centers, larger buildings. But I would say it's important to pay attention to these things. It's hard to believe that something built in 1970 might be considered historic, but it is important to keep an eye on some of those properties that were built in the later period, because one of the things that Phoenix started noticing actually 20 years ago that was of great concern is that all of these wonderful modernistic bank buildings that were built in the 1960s were being torn down one after another. And at that point in time, they were only 30 years old, 35 years old. So they would not even have been eligible for the National Register. But it's one of those things to consider in looking toward the future, is that you already have a number of older historic buildings that have been evaluated and documented, and that you pay attention to, but also to look more to the future, and especially that period where you have from 1940 to 1970, that you'll find that you will have some very important things in there if you take a look at that, and to make sure you pay attention to those things, because they can disappear. It happens very often, and hopefully, as we go into the future, that there will be some of the best of our buildings that are saved from all of the different periods of time, so that we can see that development of communities, so that we can see that, have that sense of community and that sense of place. And those are some things that can be very important going into the future. And so even a 1970 ranch house can still be very important. But I was wondering if you had any questions I might be able to answer for you. Yeah.
I realize that provision, would that be a factor? Overriding?
Well, yes, that actually happened with Gamage Auditorium in Tempe, because that was built in 1962, and it was listed on the National Register in 1983, and it was only, I think it was 20 or 23 years old at the time it was listed. And that was particularly important because it was the last major work that Frank Lloyd Wright did before his death. And so there is that, I forget what letter it is, criteria considerations. They do have that flexibility that if there is something that may be important enough but is not quite 50 years old, then they're flexible on that. And also in terms of if you have a historic district, if most of your houses in a neighborhood are 50 years old, but you have a few that are only 45, they kind of allow those in as well. Well, I've been in contact with Bill Schilling. I just he has all my contacts. So. Okay. I was thinking I have some cards. I left them in the car. So.
Showing some of the houses, my parents lived on Rick Drive, a street like you talked about, where it's kind of shakers. Till 1955. That it's got the Ransdale house, all great. That's a shame. My parents just passed away, so we sold their house after 65 years. And that thing should be as good as these streets. Even when my parents lived there, we fought for 5 years trying to get our neighbors in the city to kind of laws where they just clean up big cars that were broken, tires on them, absurd. And we got no help. This was me knowing the mayor, me knowing this. It was pathetic. And I drove by that last week. And if we can't get looking into enforced ordinance, cleanliness, I don't see how we can save it. That would be a perfect street neighborhood to try to make it historic district. And I think probably most of the neighbors would like to do something. When you get 10 neighbors who just don't care, and the city has no way to enforce them, just even making the people. I mean, you clean that street up so easy. Just basic hygiene ordinances. And also, I was totally frustrated all the time. My parents lived there, glad to pass away and see what the neighborhood turned into.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment in response? I've taken those comments from this commission, and I've asked that the City Council hold a work session on enforcing the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code, which is a part of the city's code, to actively enforce that. So that work session is coming up on a future agenda.
That would change things. I do the same thing downtown on 14. And trying to get my neighbors stuff up. So, I mean, as far as preserving historic buildings, that was some kind of standard.
That's why I like to quote Mr. Nucci of historic preservation as neighborhood preservation, because it makes it different. You have the spotlight on it. You have a lot more people aware of that. There's more pride even for people that don't live there. Say, well, this is one of our nice neighborhoods, but it has to be a nice neighborhood in order for them to say that. But it does have some effect, because some of those other neighborhoods, Tomlinson Estates and Borden Homes, had gone through a similar thing where, if you have 80% rentals, for one thing, the property owners are not putting money into maintenance of those buildings, and the tenants they have no vested interest in that. They really don't take care of the properties as well. And in this particular case, we found that the historic designation really makes quite a bit of difference. One of the problems is if things are falling apart and in such disarray already, it makes it difficult to justify having it as a historic building or a historic district. Yeah, those things are always going to be a challenge, and so it's one more little thing that can help in that fight.
Can I make a comment about that too? Aside from your frustration, which we know about, that would go also a long way, I think, towards helping alleviate people's hesitancy to be involved with things like a historic district or some kind of boundaries like that, because what they see now is we're going to get ordinances that are going to restrict us, and the ordinances we have now aren't doing a lot for us. Whereas if people start to see that the ordinances that are on the books are helping them, then they can start to see that new ordinances that are being proposed also to help them and not to restrict them. And I think it would help some of that back and forth that we have in the city.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, in response to that, the city has already adopted, I think it's called the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code. And I have asked for a work session during a council meeting, or actually before, to actually really talk about that and really talk about enforcing that. So if this issue is important to all of you as commissioners, when that work session comes up, I would ask that you would attend that and just be a part of it. Be a part of the work session, and a lot of work session items, we have discussion, and then they go into a business meeting. Probably either the next business meeting after that, or one or two meetings after that. So being at the table as our commission and having a voice and being a part of that would go a long ways, because it's going to be on all of us to support staff when they go out and start enforcing all those things. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, the tenant current RFP properties, and president is the I'm not
was on in 2015. So we have not, we're past due to evaluate those. My question is, and when I went through and did these maps, I had put down the last status, the 2015, and they indicated good, fair, or ruin. When I looked at the original submissions, they had additional categories of excellent, deteriorated, and unexposed. But they're very whimsical how they were evaluated. So I thought, if it's coming past time to reevaluate the properties, we need to have a good set of rules first that say, the definitions of what constitutes excellent, what's good. Not just, I like the color of that house, so I'm going to give it an excellent. What are those definitions so that they're fairly rated and turned back into the state and, I believe, passed on to the national?
out of my wheelhouse again here. It's all new to me in terms of CHIPO and these requirements. Is that a job this committee is supposed to take on?
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
It is, but we can get further clarification from SHPO.
Do we get it from SHPO?
We can get it from SHPO, and the state SHPO will be at the conference. You're going to go to the conference? You're not going to go? So then we just contact their office and get a better description. They do have a rubric that those fall under.
Okay.
They do.
Do you know who we contact there? I mean, I'd be happy to take that on and contact them.
It was Jim Garrison, but he's not the SHPO anymore. It's been a while for me.
Yeah.
But I would just call just the preservation office and just ask them for their definitions.
Okay.
I'm surprised they're not. Have you looked online? I'm surprised they're not just online with the Secretary of Interior standards.
I have not found them there. I haven't found.
Did you add anything else to this?
Do you know where do you know the definitions of the different statuses by any chance?
Well, generally, those four, I think they're standardized at this point. They're,
And what constitutes good compared to fair? Or
it's
it's
always
like
somewhat
who's
subjective.
whose favorite?
I don't think that they have a clear definition of that, and so a lot of times, if you have photographs and there may be some disagreement with whether something is good or fair, SHPO will usually have that discussion. Question, but you just have to best judge and come up with a fair evaluation of how.
Chairman Messersmith, Commissioners, I believe that the city this next fiscal year is going to be starting on a 2-year project to completely redo the zoning code. And as a part of that, I believe there's a historical component of that. I think that would also be worth the chairman to contact probably Gary Kellogg with Economic Development. I think that he's over the planning folks, and they're going to be the ones that are the staff personnel on that. Because I'd hate to see you guys do the same work twice. It'd be great to see everybody kind of combine efforts, and they may do it for you. So.
Anything else on this project?
Just reevaluating the status of the property. That's just a manual review, going by and reevaluating.
That would be
I think. But there are
updating.
I didn't hear a little bit more about this. Part of the
added to the property, they, their commission would still need a current photo for that year review. And so it would be part of the timeline for property, we'd still have to do.
I think they were I think they were thinking about
Those are quite old photos. Look,
The city or, my understanding, they're redoing the zoning, which is separate and distinct from property inventory. So if we did the property inventory review, I don't think that would be duplicating work of, but if we work on zoning ordinances regarding historic, that's where we.
Madam Vice Chair, I know that the scope does include a portion on the historic overlay that we have. And as a city commission, if you were to ask staff to come to your next meeting, just as a suggestion to tell you what that scope includes and what it doesn't, that may fill in some of the blanks.
Historic overlay?
Yes. I believe that the scope was looking at broadening the historic overlay. But again, I don't have the details on the scope. If the liaison from staff was here, I'd ask them. But yeah.
motion, do I have a second? Very well. Set the vote. Yeah. Maybe go before. Very time, like, still not my wheelhouse.
Can I say something about the timeline?
There, you know, set up a timeline. Committee would have to come over here, and first thing they would have to do is timeline, and these are,
We're talking about the timeline just to review the one that's existing, right? Not a new, we're working on two different things. We're working on reviewing the current inventory and updating its status. And then we're also looking at separately reviewing properties that have come into being of 50 years old since that initial review was done. There's a segment of properties that are not included that should be. And I think we can do a timeline for the first task of reviewing the one that we have because we have a quantity and we have addresses. The second task was where it became more difficult with the assessor's information not being quite correct. And that's where I was running into all my problems. So if you're talking about the first thing, I think we can set a timeline, but the second one's,
Does that make sense? Okay.
the intention of my motion.
Diane?
Along. As
cover certain.
87. That's including. There was one that are long. Who's ruins? One of them. Uh, 11. So we have 87 total. That
More of us take open your mouth side. Okay. Then if there's three of us, would be. So Greta, if you just forward a list, then evaluation of that list, evaluation.
All right. Thank you. Announcements. Hearing no other announcements, I